the relevant techniques, equipments to help you answer the question. As I mentioned, so the major part to identify a research problem is to refer to the existing literature. So that's why to achieve this, you need to conduct a literature review. The literature review usually helped to identify the research problem, as I mentioned. Except, furthermore, it can also help develop the research study, research aims, as well as the research hypothesis. It also provides valuable information for you to develop the methodology part. So here, for conducting a literature search, it should be step by step. Here suggested the 6 steps for searching the literature. First, write down the problem, and then to take a look of the secondary sources. What is secondary sources? As I mentioned, the research review articles. Except the review articles, you can also refer to a textbook, encyclopedias, and so on. However, review articles are the most excellent sources, or say more, it's better than the first, than the textbook, because the article usually more timely, and it can save your time and effort. And they also include some suggested areas of needed research, and also some valuable, relevant references for your reference. Step 3 is to consider and determine the keywords for further searching. So if the first step is to locate the secondary resources, the research review articles are the better resources. And then the third step should be using the keyword to form the keywords to have a further search in terms of the original study, because the original studies contains the detailed methodology. They are very useful for you to develop your own methodology. Yes, as I mentioned, so the step 4 is to find the primary sources. The primary sources, so using the keywords, you can search the primary original studies by using the index or bibliographies, or by conducting a computer search. And bear in mind, sometimes you may need to have a judgment in terms of the search scope, in terms of the keywords. So more commonly, especially for honors project, I would suggest you to use the Google Scholar, which is more efficient, more time saving approach to the literature search. So after identify the relevant literature, or we see the relevant studies, then you may need to read and record those articles, and based on what you found, to write up the literature review. So here are the 6 steps for searching the literature. So computer aided search become more and more popular and become the most commonly used way for searching the articles. So we can do in the e-library or the physical library because there are some catalogs and databases in the e-library. The commonly used e-databases in our e-library, including the following, it's relevant to our area. For example, Web of Science, the Educational Resources Information Center, Medline, Cyclo-Info, and so on. So I may further explain a little bit about the step 5. That means how to read and how to record the articles. So usually you should look at the research problem of the study, to look at the study hypothesis. And you also need to read carefully about the participants. What's the characteristics? For example, children, adults, the patients, or healthy human populations. And also to take a look of the instruments and the tests applied. The questionnaire or the equipments, the tests, for example, the tests for fitness level, the details, and also the data collection procedure and the testing procedure. Look at what variables they collect. There are different variables, including independent, the dependent variables. There are the 2 major types of variables. Except the 2 major types, there are also some control variables. So later in this lecture, I will introduce further about the types of variables. If there are intervention or a treatment, you may also take a look about the treatment protocol. For example, if it is a physical exercise intervention for reducing body weight, you may take a look what type of the exercise they applied at what level of the intensity and the frequency as well as the dose. You may have a look of the details, the detailed treatments. Sometimes intervention or treatment in the research, we give them the same name as treatment. So some journal articles, they may request the authors to state the research problem hypothesis. However, some, they may just request the authors to provide the study aims and objectives. Actually, they are only the different aspects of one thing. So later I'll introduce what are the research problem, what are study aims and objectives, and what are hypotheses. There are also some in-class exercise on this. Also, you need to understand the study design as well as the statistical analysis. Bear in mind, so most information in terms of study design and the statistical analysis methods at this moment may be beyond your knowledge, but never mind. Number one, so you may just need to know you may not be requested to understand exactly about what type of statistic analysis methods the author used. So actually, you may just need to know what it means on the results. It means good or bad. It means risk, increase the risk or decrease the risk. That's already good enough. Don't worry too much about the exactly statistical analysis methods. I read there two students leave the charts on me, so I may read later. Sorry. Another important information of research is about their findings, their conclusion. So through that study, what they found, and based on what the results, what conclusion they formed. That's also the important information. So if it's really most relevant to your study, you may save an e-copy. You may save an e-copy, and sometimes you may take a look of their reference lists for further studies. These slides and the next one, I show the criteria for reviewing research articles. So because when you're reading article, you should bear in mind to keep a critical review approach. That means you need to not only use your eyes, you also need your brain to think. So here are some criteria to make a judgment about the quality of a research paper. I show here. So when you read the article, you may always consider the followings. Except its usefulness to guide you in reading papers. It's also very useful when you write up your research proposal or your research thesis. So here, overall, you may take a look. It is important, and it contributes to the knowledge base significantly. So that's the overall value of the article. And then by different sections, there are different criteria for judgments. So for the introduction, sometimes it calls background. You may to check, is the research plan developed within a reasonable framework? Is current and relevant research mentioned in that part? Is the statement of the research problem clear, testable, and derived from the previous study? So these are usually help you to make a judgment about the quality of the introduction part. Sometimes it may not call introduction, it may call background. Actually, it's also the same. So in terms of the methods, it's a very important part. You should take a look. If the methods part gives the efficient and clear information in terms of the subjects, or called the participants, is the data collection tools and the data analysis and the study design. So usually to look at the following parts. Results. The results should help to address the research problem, all the research objectives, and should be, if a quantitative study or original study, the author should apply the tables and the figures to explain the results. It's maybe the best way to present the results. So usually they are also go to the latter part called discussion. This part, the author should interpret the results, put their results related to the current literature base, knowledge base, and also to draw the conclusion. So you may look at the questions to make a judgment. Most studies will give the reference, so this is a good source for you to identify more studies. And sometimes, actually, most research articles, they need abstract. Abstract should be a summary of that study in terms of the key factors or key elements of study A, the methodology, the main results, and the conclusion. Generally, you may also to take a look. This a little bit kind of minor, but so sometimes the studies need to provide some keywords, or sometimes a running title, and so on. So mostly the first 5 parts are more important for reading a research article. So in terms of reading, there are also some tips for articles. So first, you should read the title, see if it is relevant to your study, and then abstract. Not all articles need you to read the full main text. So sometimes you may already draw a decision after reading the abstract, say if it's useful or not useful. If not, if useless, you may just pass it. No need to save a copy. No need to read the main text. So that's in terms of the reading part. So after reading, if it's really relevant to your study, you need to record those articles. The best way to record the articles is to tubularize the information. That means to show their key information in tables like this one. So this one is a summary of the studies evaluating the physical activity effects on the metabolic syndrome and the associated conditions. This is one of the basic forms of the tables. So it included the study. Usually is the reference, which information can guide you to that articles. The study design and sample and gender. Those should be can be derived from methodology as well as the outcomes. So you may see here, for example, the first author found et al. That means the article has more than one authors. So this is the year that indicate the publication year. That means this article published in 1991. And what does this mean? This means the reference number. So the reference number is 36. So you roll down to the reference part at the number of 36. You could find this article. So the design is a prospective study design. So later I will introduce what is the prospective study design. So here I just briefly let you know the prospective study design means the subjects in this study are observed in a certain period. So for example, here FU means follow up. All participants were prospectively followed up for 2 years. That's it means. There are 2 years, so it's 80 years, and as long as 40 years, and all are the same study design. Sample, that means how many participants you study, the authors studied. So here as less as 200 and as larger as 8,000. Gender, because there are significant gender difference in terms of the metabolic syndromes. Sorry, in terms of the physical activity benefits on metabolic syndrome. So this table also need to identify the gender. So here you can see the first study are mixed. That means involve both male and female, and the second one were female only. So that's this. Outcome usually is the main findings, the main findings of the study. Here, for example, they observed the decreased risk of CHD, the coronary heart disease. Coronary heart disease. 冠心病. Sorry, 冠心病. Here is diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And this one, CVD, means the cardiovascular disease. So you may gradually to be familiar with this short abbreviation of the common disease. So this one is the basic table. And there are also other tables, summary tables, more complicated than the basic one, and can provide more information. For this one, for example, it's about the literature on the antiretroviral therapy for prevention of HIV transmission. HIV 大家都知㗎啦， sorry, no. So it's an antiretroviral, it's antiretroviral 逆转录酶病毒。Sorry. For this table, they also gave grouping the studies by different study design, for example. So here list the randomized control trials. However, they're only the ecological studies. So you may not understand very clearly about what is the randomized control trial, or in short, RCT. What are the ecological studies. However, because for a researcher like me, we already understand, because this kind of study design can provide a high level evidence. That means more trustable. However, this just the basic one can only provide the lower levels evidence. So it depends. It depends. Here is another one. It's commonly seen in systematic review and meta-analysis. Actually, it's a systematic review conducted by me 10 years ago. So you may see compared to the previous two, this one may be more complicated, give the different information. That's true in terms about the systematic review and meta-analysis. Whatever, I just want to show you the different tables you can consider for your proposal or for your honors project. But I would I would prefer you to have a start from the basic one. Maybe not as simple as this one, but at least start from involve at least the different for the 4 columns. Okay, as I mentioned, table line is maybe the most effective or efficient way to record the articles. So now let's have an exercise. So please find the article which are already uploaded onto the model. It's named the 2-point periods 2012 in class exercise. So you find it, have a read, and then to complete the table to show the study. For example, here is the instruction. So for study, you may write down the first author, the surname of the first author, the publication year, and the country. Put this information here. In terms of the study design, find it. Usually, you can find this information by reading the abstract. If you can't, actually, at least 90% of articles, if they're an abstract, you can draw the study aim from the abstract. If really you can't, usually you can find the study aim in the last paragraph in the section of introduction. So for this exercise, you can find it in abstract. And also draw the study design. So number 3, we look at here. Usually can also find this information from abstract. And also number 4, also from the abstract. Measures. Measures means the variables. You can usually the abstract also report about the main measures. But for the details, you need to take a look of the main tests, also main outcomes, as well as anything you want to write down in this column. So, okay, now let me take a look of the time. It's already 3:15. So we may have a 10 minutes break, and I'll leave another 10 minutes for you to read and complete this part. And then to me, maybe 15 is better. Sure. And please come back at 3:40. 3:40 3點8。跟住我去同大家 go through 下呢啲嘢嚇。10分鐘休息喎，15分鐘做呢啲嘢喎，咁你可以唔休息選擇做25分鐘有期間有咩問題你都可以問我嚇。跟住咧，我就去同大家解釋下呢一部分嚇，俾一個 suggest answer 俾大家。好唔 OK？ 大家
OK 啊
？OK 咧，咁我都係喺呢度噶。你哋咧就可以選擇頭10分鐘，跟住3點，跟住就可以睇嗰篇文章，跟住翻嚟我哋去解釋。3點 40分3點40分，我哋去 go through 呢啲嘢啦。Meanwhile，你有問題就打電話俾我又得啦，抑或係呢度問都 OK。好，3點8見。 好，大家點樣啊？做到？嗱，有啲同學覺得好簡單嚇，咁既然簡單咧，就有冇未做完㗎？都做完啦，我哋就睇下，其實真係比較簡單嘅，因為咧，你會發現好多嗰啲 key information 其實 abstract 裏邊係已經有㗎啦。雖然 abstract 通常幾百字啦，幾百個 words， 300啦。咁通常其實，尤其係一啲叫做 structure 嘅 abstract，即係話寫清楚 background sometimes objective result conclusion 所以咧係個 abstract 裏邊你都已經可以將最重要嘅 information 係 draw 翻出嚟啦。呢個就係點解係 assignment one 裏邊，我同大家講，即係話你又睇 abstract，睇下佢有冇 show data， 其實呢啲即係大多數都可以做一個即係攞到足夠嘅信息做一個 decision 㗎啦。咁同埋有啲文章佢係冇 abstract 嘅，係依家啦以前可能去到2000年之前嘅文章咧就好難講啦越係 OK。好， 大家睇唔睇得到我嘅 screening 啊 sharing 啊 ？OK， 好彩我又唔記得同大家有同學問我會唔會 make 一個 video record 嚇，我會㗎。依家我唔知我如果 make record 嗰時大家睇唔睇到，因為有時break 嗰時我去停咗佢，間中佢唔記得就係 resume 翻啊。不過今次記得㗎。好，我同大家講啦嚇，即係如果比較早期發表嘅文章咧，佢未必係有一個 abstract 㗎嚇，但係越係近期近20年上下啦，發表嘅文章，如果冇個 abstract 嘅話咧，你不如就唔好睇佢啦，睇唔到。大多數人都睇到喎。大家睇唔睇到我嘅screen 㗎 ？No。Let me try it again. 依家睇唔睇得到？哦，好，唔該晒。可能我頭先 show 翻個 article 唔記得轉，你而家睇到噶啦嚇。其實都未 miss 咗咩其他嘢，我仲未 show 翻個 answer 啊。我只不過係話俾大家知，係你可以喺邊度攞翻個 information 啊。最主要係個 abstract。如果你見到條文啊係2000年打後發表嘅，仲冇個 abstract 嘅話，不如你就唔好要啦嚇。就盡量揀其他，即係話明嗰個study 真係 quality 麻麻噶啦，係啦，好，咁我哋就睇翻個 suggest answer 嚇。首先嗰個 first author 嘅 surname 2012年發表嘅，咁國家咧係 Australia， 呢個好似難咗少少，不過都揾得到㗎嚇。有同學話好犀利，好容易揾。Study 其實 copy paste 就 OK 啦啊，因為通常呢啲 table 咧係 for 你去用㗎啊，你真係有發表嘅話咧，就需要就去即係就去整得靚啲，但係 for 你自己用嗰時咧，你就唔需要計較咁多。總之你睇得明就 OK 噶啦嚇。其實好似我點形容咧，大家都知道你build up 一個 building 嗰時，你要搭棚咁啊，係嘛？你要搭嗰啲棚架嚇，呢啲就好似一啲棚架嚟啫咯。所以咧係 for 你自己用㗎，唔需要整得咁靚。講下嗰啲 publication， 即係我哋頭先嗰啲 samples 就唔同啦，因為嗰啲已經係 publish 嗰啲 tables， 嗰啲就一定要靚啦啊！所以 for 你自己用嗰時，你就 copy paste 就得啦。你睇我呢個都好肉酸㗎，係嘛？係 to examine the influence of aerobic fitness，blah blah blah blah， 係啦。Study design 係一個 controlled trial， 呢個大家係有少少難度，唔緊要因為 for 你哋真係 honest project 嘅話咧，又去唔到咁高嘅要求。你咧如果分得到最好，分唔到咧，其實都唔係好緊要，試一試啦。你唔試你點知你得唔得咧 ？Study subjects 8個 trend 8個 end-trend 呢啲應該冇問題啦。measures IV IV 咧嚟緊上我個堂一講 IV 一定係 independent variables for 呢個 study independent variables 可能大家好難 for 一個 paper 可能佢會講清楚我 independent variable 係咩 DV 就係 dependent variable 係乜嘢 CV 就係 control variable 乜嘢，但係你又可以自己去 draw 翻嚟for 呢個 study independent variable 就係嗰個 training DV 咧就係話個 outcome variable、dependent variable thermal response 啦、cardio blah blah 嘅。CV 咧就係咩咧？係一啲 control variable 係一啲 confounding variable， 即係話佢可能會影響到 IV 同埋 DV 嘅關係，你要去控制下㗎呢啲叫做要控制，所以有 control 就 control variable 啦。呢個佢有少少難度，唔緊要，因為嚟緊我哋係呢一堂裏邊仲有第二個練習呢個我就會更加 detail 去講呢啲嘢，要你去練一練，睇下我點去揾呢啲重要嘅 variable 尤其係頭兩類。main outcomes 係 copy paste 得㗎啦，讀得懂就 OK 啦呢度就係aerobically blah 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 就做翻嚟。remark 我呢度就講咗少少因為點解咧？佢個 outcome measure 裏邊咧，即係因為複雜咗少少，同埋有啲人 withdraw， 就係因為佢係嗰個intervention， 有啲人係做唔到就要 withdraw 㗎，所以我就 mark 低咗少少。通常咧，即係呢個真係要睇你自己啦。需要 mark 你就 mark， 唔需要 mark 你就唔 mark。咁你做 mark 嗰時，中文又得，英文又得，總之你係自己睇㗎。呢啲我就唔建議你用中文㗎啦，因為呢啲淨係其實依家好方便，你 copy paste 就出翻嚟啦，何必你要自己就寫咧？除非咁你話我又發表文章啦，我又寫翻我個proposal 裏邊啦，你話我又寫翻我個 thesis 裏邊啦。哇，咁你就要好好揸一揸㗎啦咁樣就要酸啲，就擺落去唔單唔會幫到你加分，仲會幫到你求分，咁就陰功㗎啦係啦。對呢個 class exercise， 大家有冇問題啊？好，唔該晒。冇問題咧，我哋就繼續噶啦。講下邊，咁我都打開咗呢個 recording 喺邊度。
Recording in progress。
最後一步啦，你要寫翻sorry， so the last step you need to write the literature review. For this course, you are not required to write up an independent chapter of literature review. However, for honors project, there an independent chapter. There you need to write up a literature review with a minimal words requirement of 1,000. So here I introduce how to write up the chapter. Usually the chapter should include the following 3 parts. First, give an introduction, maybe not very lengthy, but at least you give a summary, a concise introduction, and then the main body, where I would suggest you structure this part to summary and synthesize the articles you reviewed. At last, you have to use the last paragraph to summarize the main findings and draw your conclusion. So here is the last step to write up the literature review. Once again, for this course, you won't be requested to write up an independent chapter. However, on this project, it is. So in your thesis, the chapter, I would also suggest you to tabulize the main key information and then use the main text to interpret the tables. So here shows you an example, and you may have a read of this table and try to write the main text of that table to interpret the table's contents and to provide some supplementary information. So this table actually is a summary of 6 studies in terms of the adulthood, overweight, and obesity. So here's a reference and the characteristics of the study group. The 2 columns, this one in terms of the age group, and this one in terms of the body weight, the classification of the body weights, the number of the subjects, and also the program, the focus of the program. Some are for the obesity prevention and some for hypertension. And here, actually, I may introduce a little bit more what is the briefs in. Actually, this is the intervention, the components of intervention. Here, PA means the physical activity intervention. The D means diet, education, behavior modification. RA, I also need to have a look. RA, that means the incentives or rewards involved. So, for example, this one is a comprehensive intervention involving physical activity, diet, education, behavior modification, as well as rewards. The duration, the intervention lasts for 10 months, and the outcome measured as BMI, change in BMI. That means change decreased, significantly decreased. So that's the table. And as I mentioned, in terms of the literature review, better try to use the tables to present the outcome, and then to give the some test to interpret that table, as well as to state, to supplement some other informations. So here gives the tips how to write up the main text. So bear in mind to check if it gives the necessary explanation of that table, and also try to keep as concise as possible. And then the main text should also provide the supplementary information, which is not included in that table. So here you may have a look of the short paragraph and pay more attention about those underlined. 5 minutes, please have a read. So after reading, you may consider their relationship to check if this main text fulfill the 2 tips. So OK，應該大多數同學都讀完啦，所以我哋可以睇到，其實呢個真係對嗰個前面嗰個 table 嘅一個 summary 啊。當你 summary 嗰時，你要諗清楚我究竟係用邊個方法啊？有 category 有 similar studies 啊，and also if possible to identify the differences across studies。我呢一個咧，佢就係用咗個 study design 去講，唔係 outcome 有啲係降低咗嗰個 BMI，有啲咧就冇發現另外咧要仲講咗下一啲study design 嘅影響所以咧大家可以睇到 for 呢一種literature review，你除咗第一步去 list 翻。唔理你係用table 啦，一係用 non-test 呢種形式，係 list 翻嗰個你要 review 嗰啲 study 嘅嗰啲non elements 你仲有自己有一個 synthesize 又有個自己嘅一個 synthesize 呢啲 outcome 呢啲 studies 嗰時咧，你要諗一啲方法，即係點可以 group 埋。similar 嘅 study group 埋一齊去講，冇淨係one by one，我將嗰啲summarize 嗰啲study one by one 就 OK 啦。呢個唔係一個literature review 嚟嘅呢個只不過係 literature review 裏邊嘅第一步。而 literature review 裏邊最重要嘅一步咧，就係你要 synthesize 嗰啲 outcome， 跟住俾翻你自己嘅一啲critical 嘅一啲 review， 一啲 comments， 一啲 suggestions 係呢啲先係 review 需要做啲嘢。去寫一個 literature review 係可能 for 一個 beginner 嚟講係難啲㗎因為咧你又要一定嘅 knowledge 一定嘅技巧。不過唔緊要，你試一試我哋本身其實 honors program 要求都唔係好多㗎大多數同學都應該可以做得到㗎，冇問題只要你係做多少一少試一試。咁我比較同埋 synthesize 嗰啲 study 嗰時咧，你可以即係 for 呢一個就係擺結果㗎啦有效冇效嘅，你又可以擺唔同嘅研究嘅方法目的結果都可以嘅換翻你自己嘅方法係啦。好跟住我哋就 for 呢個 table 同埋佢呢個說明，大家有冇問題冇，我哋就繼續噶啦大家睇唔睇到我個 screen 啊？依家應該係 slides 嗰個 slides title 係 Avoiding Jargons when Writing， 睇唔睇得到啊？大家睇唔睇到 ？Can't， 好，我再試多一次。依家睇唔睇得到？ OK，唔該晒。好，係啦，寫嗰時咧，大家其實要記得，一個唔理你係寫 proposal，抑或係寫 thesis，佢係一個 scientific report scientific report 咧，佢有佢自己嘅規律嚟嘅我哋叫做一個 scientific plain language without jargons 咩叫 jargons 咧？其實好多時候大家雖然即係你讀嗰啲小說英文小說，佢係講究嘅係優美，但係咧我哋 scientific report 講求嘅未必係優美，係簡單準確。所以咧呢啲 jargons for example。A considerable amount of 其實就係 much a great portion 所以咧就盡量總之呢度咧就係簡單冇太多好靚嘅表達華麗嘅詞組唔需要嘅簡單準確係一個反而係一個 key 嚟啫。In the introduction, after the literature review, you need to present your research problem. So how to present the problem? In our textbook is another chapter. Usually we need to choose the title, write the part, and state the research problem, and also to justify or to state the significance of your study. So usually at the first beginning, we write down the title. At that moment, actually, it's just a tentative title. So the final title should be determined after the last sentence to write up the finalize the title. So why we need a title? So actually, the main purpose of the title is to state the focus of the study. To achieve this purpose, a title should comment the focus of the study. So too long or too short, both are no good for a title. So there show some common problems in terms of the title, including the too long or too short, including some useless words. For example, a study of. Every article is a report of a study, so there no useful information can draw from this. However, this one are useful here. So between A and study, they're including another word called cross-sectional. Because why this one is useful, and more journals more recently requires the authors or encourage the authors to including the study design in the title, because for this study design, for a study design, there are similar objectives, there are similar advantages and disadvantages. So based on the study design, the readers will understand more about the limitations or the advantages of that study. So that's why. In short, a study of should be avoided from your title. However, you are encouraged to state your study design in the title, like this one, cross-sectional study. It's a cross-sectional study design. So after writing down the tentative, remember tentative title, you need to write an introduction. So here, list the some aspects or requirements of a good introduction. So usually the author should have the appropriate or the enough literacy skills. A good introduction can create and can draw interest from the readers. And a good introduction should clearly demonstrate the key points of the study, without the technical jargons. And better, you should know the readers who will read your articles. And also, usually we need to identify the research problem and decide on the hypothesis, and then to complete this section, the introduction section. So here shows some elements, important elements of a good introduction. So the example will show to you in the will be shown in the next slide. So we just I want to highlight what's the important elements in terms of a good introduction. First, usually start from a general introduction and then narrow down to the background information of your study, and then mention about the research gaps as well as the area you needed research, and then lead in to your research problem. So more like the three-step approach. The first, more general information, and narrow down to the background information and the research gap, as well as the research statements. So after read the example, see whether you can draw the purpose from the example. So here is the example. Please use 2 minutes to have a read and to think why it called the general introduction, why it called the background information, and what's leading to feel about their structure, their roadmap to the research purpose. 2 minutes, please.好，我哋一齊睇一睇分析下點解呢個 example 係一個good introduction。 梁海，我睇唔到個 full name 你嗰個 question research from the past studies， 我唔係好明你想問乜嘢。如果方便嘅話，你開個咪問啦。好你可以考慮下因為我未係好明你嗰個問題係咩，咁我因為收唔到呢個回覆，我哋就先睇一睇，一齊去睇一睇點解呢個叫一個 good example 好啦，大家可以睇你一篇文章，頭先講啦 introduction， 你一定由一開始你要捉住人哋嘅興趣點係嘛，捉住嗰啲 readers 嘅眼球係啦。for 呢一個其實咧佢第一步就講啦 ，research shows regular physical activity 可以 reduce 嗰個coronary heart disease CHD 就係對冠心病係有幫助嘅。冠心病又係美國嘅leading cause， 即係最嚴重嘅一個疾病。嗱，大家一睇就覺得你好有興趣因為點解咧？大家都知道冠心病其實係 top one killer，top one killer。咁運動可以降低嘅喎，咁我就可能有興趣去睇繼續睇嘅。所以咧嗰個 general introduction 呢一 part 好多時候咧，你俾人哋嘅我想定位喺邊個 area呢個 area 咧要讓大家覺得比較重要啲大家去讀文章運動其中一個除咗 performance for 精英運動員嘅 performance， 對於 general 嘅 population 大多數嘅你同我嚟講，好多時候做運動就係為咗身體健康尤其係去到一定嘅年紀啦你哋可能未必體會得到我就體會到好重要啦。所以咧同埋咧本身 research 大家好多時候都係for improving health， 所以咧呢個 general introduction 拋翻出嚟嘅 CHD 係最重要嘅top killer 係嘛？跟住要鋪翻出嚟係運動可以降低，所以咧佢嘅 general 嘅 introduction 第一定會到呢個 exercise 同埋heart disease 嗰個 area， 另外又 draw 咗大家嘅興趣，所以係一個寫得又簡單又不錯嘅地方。好啦，跟住我哋睇第二個 paragraph， 其實第二個 paragraph 佢有啲information 就冇details 冇show 翻出嚟啦只不過佢係 key information 就到翻嚟啦，就係話咩叫 background information 大家知道其實運動同埋even運動同埋冠心病都係一個好闊嘅一個 area佢可能係一啲general 嘅 intervention， 又可能係一啲 basic research。所以究竟呢個 research 佢想講乜嘢咧？所以咧佢就 narrow down 係 narrow down to the background information of that study 所以呢度咧就係話elevated plasma levels of cholesterol and triglycerides associated with CVD development 一睇我就知道啦大家一睇就知道啦。佢想話運動降低冠心病嘅風險，佢係想通過咩嗰個 cholesterol同埋triglycerides 通過嗰個 lipids 血脂呢方面去講噶啦。所以咧你大家可以睇到我係通過呢方面narrow down 到呢個 more basic 一個 area， basic research 呢個 area。 跟住咧係最後一個 paragraph 嚇，lead in 咧就係話你喺呢度你要講翻喺呢個 area 裏邊仲有啲咩 research gap 啊，有啲咩問題未解決需要解決嘅嚇，你可以通過呢個 study 去解決嘅啊，所以咧呢度就可以睇個 lead in。So the research on positive effects of regular physical activity on the plasma lipids is extensive. Few studies have mentioned the changes in plasma lipid levels in individuals who exercise regularly for more than 10 years. 佢就講翻，其實好多研究去睇運動同埋 lipids 嘅關係嘅，但係絕大多數都係咩啊 ？short term。個 long term of the observation 係少嘅，係啊，所以咧其實睇完呢啲，你都應該知道佢個研究係想做咩㗎？去睇一睇一個長期嘅 regular 嘅運動同嗰個 lipids 嘅關係。所以咧可以睇到佢嘅 independent variable ID 咧就係運動，咁佢嘅 dependent variable 即係 outcome variable 咧就係嗰個 changes in cholesterol 同埋triglycerides 即係 lipids。咁可以估到嘅 control variable 咧就可能係gender 男同埋女啦、年紀啦，可能嘅就係因為 lipids 除咗運動同佢有關係，食嘢都係好有關係嘅嚇，你都可以估到好多嘅同埋其實可能 for 你哋就難啲 for 我就估到佢係一個 prospective study design 所以咧呢個就係一個好嘅 introduction 可以帶翻嚟出嚟嘅啲嘢，即係我係建議大家就係三部曲第一步俾翻一啲 general 嘅 introduction 去 draw 翻大家嘅興趣，第二步咧就係 show 翻更近啲同你嘅 study 更近啲更 narrow 啲嘅一啲 information 依家嘅研究係點樣呈現嘅結果係點樣，呢啲就係 show 翻個 research gap lead to your study research problem study A 係啦呢啲嘢係啦，呢個就係個 further interpret of this sample。好，有冇問題？
冇。
好，冇依家就4:20，我哋唞10分鐘，跟住翻嚟咧，我就去講翻個 study aim objectives 同埋一啲 variables， 跟住我哋堂就完咗噶啦。完咗之後咧，佢有個 assignment two 咧，其實就係要你寫翻你個 group 想做嘅想寫個 proposal 嘅一個 title 一啲嘢，咁中間都會有啲時間，我去分幾個 group，咁麻煩你哋一齊去傾一傾好就4:30見，我都會喺呢度，有問題你都隨時可以問我一陣間見。
Recording stopped.
好啦，大家翻嚟啦。咦，大家睇唔睇到嗰啲 PowerPoint？睇唔睇得到？好，唔該。好啦，翻轉頭我哋講research problem. So now we're talking about the research problem, and with context of our honors requirement of our honors project. Actually, no matter research problem, study design, objectives, and hypothesis, they are different presentation way of the similar thing or the same thing. So for our so in case course for our proposal and later on your honors project, we ask we request the study design, study aim, objectives, and hypothesis only. So that's why I focused my lectures on the three things. So study aims usually state the overall purpose of the study. It's a broader statement in terms of the outcomes you want to achieve, and emphasize what you want to complete, usually address the long-term outcome. And for one study, better no more than 3 study aims in only one study. So however, what are the study objectives? Actually, study objectives are under the study aim, subsidiary to the study aims. Actually, it's a group of tasks you want to complete, and by completing those tasks to achieve your study goals. So usually the study objectives are measurable, testable, and feasible, achievable. This is the SMART criteria of the study objectives. So these slides show the relationship, summarize the relationship between study aim and objectives. So here, let's take a look. Both aims and the objectives should be as conscious as possible, and should be interrelated with each other. The aim should be what you want to achieve, while the objectives should be the tasks you want to achieve. Do not have the study aim and objectives too broad, and do not too ambitious. Sometimes also avoid repeating each other in the different terms. So here show you some example the study aim. Let's take a look. So the study aim of a study is to investigate incidence rates and risk factors of physical activity related injuries among undergraduates in Hong Kong. So to achieve the overall purpose of the study, the authors specify the following objectives. The first, to investigate the overall incidence rates, and then to examine, to achieve that risk, to identify the risk factors. By identify risk factors, the authors wrote down the following objectives on the tasks: to examine the relationship between gender and the injury, to examine the relationship between the physical activity levels and the injury in the samples. So here you may see the authors identify the gender, physical activity, and maybe other factors as the potential risk factors of the injury. So here is example derived from an honors project thesis. You may also find that thesis in the e-library. So here, clearly, the overall purpose the study want to target. And in order to target the overall purpose, what are the tasks, what are the specific, detailed objectives the author want to address in that study. It's very clearly stated here. So take a look of the. So now it's let's do an in-class exercise. You are already read the samples, 3.1. So now please draw the study in and the study objectives from this sample. Actually, I already stated the study aim and objectives when I explained the example. So we may now just take a look of the suggested answers. So the study aim of that example is to examine the long-term, the effect of the long-term exercise in terms of reducing the risk of coronary heart disease. So what's the risk? The study further measured what? The cholesterol and also the triglycerides, the two here. So the study, the detailed objective, because the cholesterol can be measured in that study. Triglycerides also can be measured. Both are the risk factors of the coronary heart disease. Here in this course and next in the honors project, you also need to write down a non-hypothesis. So here I may also introduce you what are the hypotheses. So recall the knowledge you learned in the prerequisite course about the statistic, where you were requested. You learned about the research hypothesis. They're usually present in pairs. One called research hypothesis, which described the expected results, and another one called null hypothesis. That means described the non-significant difference or relationship. Usually they come in pairs. So however, here gives an example of the pair of hypotheses, research hypothesis here. Physical inactivity would be associated with hypertension among adults in Hong Kong. That means the author expect the physical inactivity should be significantly related with hypertension. And here the author also gave the null hypothesis. That means the physical inactivity would be not here. That's a negative sentence associated with hypertension in this sample. So you may notice the research hypothesis is the outcome you want to find through the study, where the non-hypothesis you set here to refuse. So both should be used the future tense with exactly used would, not will. You should use would in the hypothesis. That's the correct format of a hypothesis, the pair of hypothesis. And also in this course and in honors project, you just request to write down the non-hypothesis. Write down only one, no need the pair, only the non-hypothesis. Okay, there come to another exercise. So you may read the objectives, then to write down the non-hypothesis. Due to the limited time, we may do the exercise together. So the first one objective is to investigate the overall incidence rates of actually this specific exercise related injury in this time period among this population. So here, actually, because think of this, we can't expect the exactly rates of the problem, the injury. So actually, this objective does not have the corresponding line hypothesis. That means we can't expect the exactly incidence rates for this population. There are also no corresponding tests related to this objective. However, the second one there, it has to examine the evaluation between gender and the injury. So for the corresponding non-hypothesis of this objective, it is gender would be not related with the injury. Similar to the objective 2, the objective 3 also has the non-hypothesis stating there are no relationship between the physical activity level and the injury in this sample. So here I show you about the study aims, study objectives, and the hypothesis request in this course and in your honors project. So any questions about this part? No, and we go to the last part. So for consider the operational definition. That means to consider the variables you want to measure. So variables, as I mentioned earlier in this class, there are different types of variables. For a study, there are two key groups of variables. One named dependent variable, another named independent variable. Let's take a look one by one. The dependent variable actually is what is measured to assess the effects of the independent variables. That means it's the outcome, it's the effect of the study. Well, the independent variable is can be the experimental or a treatment, and also can be a factors of the cause of the effect. There are another two types of variables. They're less important than the ID and the IV and the DV. One is called the control variables, in short, the CV, and another called extraneous variables. Control variables actually is a factor which may influence the results. So therefore, you should control for their influence in the study. What is the extraneous variable? It also has another name called the uncontrolled variables. Actually, it's also a factor. However, in your study, you can't control for it beyond your control. So this is called extraneous variables. So let's draw the four types of variables from the example. We already should be very familiar of this example. So we can draw the dependent variables. At least two we can draw from this study. One dependent variable is the cholesterol. The second is the triglycerides. That's the two dependent variables. Independent variable of this study, that is the regular exercise. What are the control variables? If you noticed what I explained before, you may already know. Gender, for example, age, maybe the habits, the eating habits, they also. What's the extraneous variables? Usually we can't make a judgment at this moment unless we read through the whole paper and know, for example, if they, in this study, if they didn't collect any information about eating, and then eating habits will be the one of the extraneous variables. So here already we're done. So we can see the extraneous variable, it's possible variables. However, the study didn't consider except the eating, the genetic factors. If they didn't measure, will also be extraneous variables. So the last part of the introduction, you should state the significance. You should state the significance of the study. What means the significance of the study? That means after complete your study with the results, the exact results, your study, the contribution of your study to this area. So the value, that means the value of the study. So here gives an example of the description of the significance of the study. So let me have a look together here. There's a knowledge gap about the injuries and the correlates in Hong Kong children. So this study will provide preliminary information about the incidence rates. In addition, this study also will examine the relationship between the injury and some factors, which also provide consideration to this area. So there give the example of the significance of the study, which derived from a previous thesis done by previous students. So here, check your knowledge of your understanding. Also, due to the time limits. Let's do together. So let's take a look of the scenario, the description first. Skill acquisition of 3 groups of the grade 4 boys and girls who have been taught by different teaching styles. That means styles A, B, and C. So based on this description, draw a title, study aim, objectives, yeah, all the elements out. So here is the suggest answer. The title, effectiveness of 3 different teaching styles on skill acquisition among grade 4 students. Here also the study aim is to examine the effectiveness. The possible objectives can be the 2. The first, to compare the effectiveness of the 3 styles, and also to compare the gender difference in terms of the skill acquisition among the samples. So based on the 2 study objectives, here suggest the 2 corresponding null hypotheses. One is there would be no difference across the 3 teaching styles, which echo the first objective. The second objective, we can draw the null hypothesis of this is would be no differences between boys and girls. In terms of the variables, the dependent variable is the skill acquisition. The dependent variables, that means the 3 different teaching styles. Control variable, gender. The others you need to consider based on your knowledge, maybe the IQ level, or the individual, the students' individual skill level at baseline, which all may be the factors have an influence on the outcome. So could be the extraneous variables. So okay, now I end my part. So now we still have 25 minutes. So now to break down, let me check how many groups do we have.好啦，我哋接落嚟嘅時間咧，就係有 group discussion 啦。我先睇一睇我哋有幾多個 group， 1、2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、10、11、12、13。好，我哋咧 total 有13個 group， 咁咧我就將佢 break 咗13個 rooms 出翻嚟。咁大家需要做啲乜嘢咧？大家就需要咧去 based on 我哋嘅 knowledge 做一個 discussion。咁咧討論啲咩嘢咧？就係討論呢個 assignment 2。即係我盡量將嗰啲 assignments 咧壓縮到係用嘅class 嘅時間去做。咁咧你可以討論呢啲嘢，做翻出嚟咧，寫落嚟嘅話咧，就可以喺呢個時間之前通過 Moodle 用 group leader submit 呢個 assignment 2。所以咧我去各個格仔裏邊去入去問一問，你有問題可以問㗎。所以咧就大家明唔明白？明白嗰時我就分 group 㗎。明唔明啊？ ？Hello， 有冇同學啊？
明啊，
有
明啊，
明啦嚇，
明白
明咧咁
，Miss。
咧就group leader 啊，負起責任。咁你入咗你嗰個揾翻呢個 room 入去先，跟住咧 group leader 入咗去咧，咁其他同學咧就你唔好求其入去嚇，你又揾到呢個 group leader，你先入嗰個room 啊，13個，唔好去中間巡噶啦。好啦，大家睇唔睇得到啊？Group leader 你先入咗去啊，group leader 你入咗去之後咧，就 group members 你就
淨係得一
睇住
間房啫喎，暫時。
啊，
係啊，
請等等哈，暫時一間房，唔係我分咗13間喎。
得一間咋？
請等等，我再試多一次。
Recording in progress.
誒，都係第一間啊？點解咧？
冇房啊，冇房，Miss。
係啊，我知道，我發覺都係冇房，我點可以操作咧？
喂，
啊？有冇同學教下路啊？我都唔知咩發生咗。哦，又等一等啊，等10秒啊，其實佢有個時間限制嘅，所以大家等一等啊。OK， 我可以噶啦哈，再重新嚟過。
都係得一間房啫喎，Miss。
我都睇到，因為咧呢個 app 係有少少得意噶。我打開咗第一次，我 set 咗13間房，唔知點解呢度得 show 翻一間，跟住我每一次 close 佢咧，佢就要等1分鐘我。大家可唔可以先全部都出翻嚟啊？我重新操作。係我嘅問題，我唔記得撳 creation。哎呀，係我嘅問題，我打咗個3，唔記得，我 delete 咗佢。依家應該13間房噶啦，係嘛 ？Hello，
未有啊，
房都冇啊，
見唔到個掣喎。
冇房啊，
book 晒啦。
依家咧？
有啊，掂啊？
見到啦，見到啦。
有啦，有啦，有啦，
有。
好，唔該。咁麻煩 group leader 係啦，入咗去先，跟住咧就 group member 就可以入咗去噶啦。你咧如果係堂上一齊討論咧，會比較容易，即係首先慳咗你哋係下邊討論嘅時間啦。咁你如果有問題